King Charles has honoured his brother Prince Edward in a most royal manner on his birthday. Fittingly, the King's younger brother was in Scotland on the day a new title was bestowed upon him.
Friday, March 13th, 2026, did not begin like a royal morning. It began like a reckoning behind locked palace doors. The crown looked bruised, the vault stayed sealed, and King Charles was suddenly facing the one nightmare no monarch wants to see, a private family fortune turning into a legal battlefield. The so-called Windsor Black File had landed with force, breaking the old belief that the sovereign could move anything, sign anything, and silence anyone without consequence. At the heart of the storm stood Queen Camilla, accused inside palace circles of building a quiet power network around the privy purse while Charles carried the public weight of the crown. For months, insiders allegedly called it the Asset Concentration Mandate, a smooth-sounding name for a hardball financial squeeze. The pitch was simple: streamline the monarchy, tighten control, stop loose spending, and bring every royal branch back under one central command. But behind that clean wording, critics say the plan looked more like a purge than reform. Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, were not being protected. They were being boxed in. That is where Camilla's reported tension with Sophie becomes impossible to ignore. Sophie had something Camilla could never buy with titles or palace upgrades: the deep trust of the late Queen Elizabeth II. She was steady, quiet, loyal, and loved without needing to perform for power. To Camilla, that kind of respect was dangerous. It gave Sophie influence without noise, and in palace politics, quiet influence can hit harder than a public speech. So the alleged strategy was cold and simple: control the money, control the family. If Edward and Sophie could be pushed into financial dependence, then every request, every household decision, every future move would pass through Charles and Camilla's circle. No open fight, no messy public feud, just a velvet rope pulled tighter and tighter until the Edinburgh branch had no room to breathe. But Camilla reportedly misread the room in a major way. She saw Edward as too polite to push back, and treated Lady Louise and James, Earl of Wessex, like background names in a royal family tree. That was the mistake. Because while the old guard looked busy protecting rank, the younger generation was watching patterns, tracking pressure points, and noticing where the palace paper trail started looking shaky. Then came the legal strike. When the team from Farah and Company reportedly arrived at the Privy Purse entrance, they were not there for tea, soft talk, or another polite royal delay. They came with documents, timelines, and a forensic retrieval plan that had clearly been built for months. Staff described the mood inside the king's private study as ice cold. Charles, the man raised to believe the crown was the final word, was now staring at files that suggested the crown had limits after all. According to the dossier, the challenge was not powered by politicians or outsiders trying to embarrass the monarchy. It was rooted in the late Queen's own instructions, the private legal wishes Charles allegedly ignored while following advice from Camilla's side of the palace. That detail is what made the moment brutal. This was not rebellion against the crown. This was the crown being forced to answer to the woman who wore it before him. The Windsor Black File reportedly points to more than £35 million in disputed transfers, moved under the banner of modernisation. Camilla's allies allegedly sold the plan as necessary housekeeping, but Edward's side viewed it as something far darker, a grab at private family legacy dressed up as responsible governance. The money was not presented as public funding. It was described as inherited property, protected assets, and family wealth that required proper trustee consent. That is why Charles is now facing the most bitter lesson of his reign. A king may command ceremony, uniforms, honours, and tradition, but probate law does not bow because someone wears a crown. If the disputed assets were deeded under specific conditions, then royal confidence means nothing without legal authority. And now, the same signatures that once looked powerful may be treated as weak, exposed, and possibly void. Inside the palace, this is where the fear really started spreading. The file allegedly shows repeated reallocations from accounts linked to Edward's household, with missing secondary trustee approval. That missing approval matters. It means the issue is not just who wanted the money moved, but whether the people moving it had the right to touch it at all. In street terms, the palace may have tried to run the table without checking who actually owned the chips. Camilla's reported logic was sharp but arrogant. She allegedly pushed the idea that divided wealth created divided loyalty, and that every valuable asset should return to the centre. Norfolk properties, ancestral investments, private collections, and protected holdings were all said to be pulled toward the privy purse system. The goal, according to critics, was not just financial order, it was leverage. And leverage is the real scandal here. If one office controls every pound, then every royal sibling becomes a petitioner. Every disagreement becomes risky. Every act of independence becomes expensive. That kind of pressure does not need shouting. It works quietly, through delayed approvals, unanswered requests, and the humiliating message that survival depends on obedience. But Edward was not sleeping through the storm. While Camilla's camp allegedly treated him like a soft target, he was documenting movements, preserving records, and watching the palace machinery turn against his own branch. He may have looked calm in public, but behind the scenes, the quiet rebel was apparently building a map of every asset, every missing signature, and every questionable order. The mandate also touched the future of the younger royals, and that is where the story gets even sharper. Lady Louise and James were not just names on the edge of the family. They represented the next line of Windsor dignity, the branch that had stayed loyal, stayed modest, and avoided the public mess. Starving that household financially was not just about Edward and Sophie. It was about making sure their children had no stable base from which to challenge the new order. Now, the whole palace is staring at the fallout. The asset concentration mandate, once whispered about as a tool of control, has become the very document that could expose the limits of Charles and Camilla's authority. What was meant to centralize power has instead created a trail of questions, and those questions are moving from gossip pages into legal territory. Camilla, who allegedly thought she was securing her husband's reign, may have handed his critics the perfect weapon. Her shadow structure is no longer hidden behind polished palace language. It is sitting on the king's desk, tied to disputed transfers, trustee concerns, and the late queen's final wishes. The empire she tried to build is cracking under the weight of its own paper trail. And while palace insiders expected Prince Edward to bend like he had done for years, they badly misjudged the silence around him. The biggest move did not come from Parliament, press officers, or the usual royal fixers. It came from within the next generation, led by Lady Louise Windsor and Zara Tindall, two women who reportedly spent months moving carefully in the shadows, while Charles and Camilla tightened their grip on the family fortune, forming the quiet front line of a fight to reclaim the integrity of the Windsor legacy. Behind the soft image of Lady Louise Windsor was a mind Camilla's circle clearly failed to read. For years, Louise had been seen as the quiet, artistic daughter of Prince Edward and Sophie, the type of royal who stayed away from noise, cameras, and ugly palace games. But inside this crisis, that quiet image became her strongest cover. While the king and queen believed Edward's restraint meant weakness, Louise understood the truth. Her father's silence was not surrender. It was strategy. It was the velvet glove hiding a legal blade. For nearly a year, Louise had reportedly been studying the asset concentration mandate line by line, comparing it with sealed private probate instructions left by Queen Elizabeth II. What she found was devastating. The king's authorizations were not just questionable. They were structurally flawed. Key signatures from secondary trustees were missing, and those signatures were not optional. According to the late Queen's final instructions, they were required. That meant Charles was not simply managing family wealth, he was allegedly moving protected assets without the full legal authority needed to do it. To Louise, this was not just about money, it was about disrespecting her grandmother's final wishes, weakening her parents' household, and allowing Camilla's shadow system to rewrite the private legacy of the crown. Beside Louise stood Zara Tindall, tough, direct, and famously allergic to royal bootlicking. Zara became the operational bridge between the legal team and the palace insiders who were tired of watching the mandate tighten around the family. She moved through the household with the confidence of someone who never needed a title to have power. She did not kiss the ring, and she did not flinch. According to Palace Whispers, Zara was the one who helped secure the Windsor Black File from a loyal group of archive keepers, alarmed by the strange financial moves being pushed through the king's private offices. These staff members had watched too much, filed too much, and finally decided the paper trail could not stay buried. Zara knew how to move fast, keep people calm, and get the right evidence into the right hands. Together, Louise and Zara formed a quiet but dangerous coalition. They were not fighting for gossip. They were not chasing headlines. They were building a case that placed law above rank and legacy above ego. And when the moment finally came, they did not enter the palace like nervous relatives. They entered like women who knew exactly where the bodies of the paperwork were buried. The climax arrived in the early hours surrounding March 16th, 2026, a date Palace insiders now describe as the moment the royal mask cracked. At exactly 10 a.m., Lady Louise Windsor and Zara Tindall reportedly walked into the Oak Room, where the king's closest advisors expected another controlled family discussion. They were wrong. Louise and Zara did not bow. They did not plead. They did not ask for permission to be heard. They placed a mountain of forensic evidence in front of King Charles, showing that every major asset concentration move linked to Camilla's advice was not just morally ugly, but potentially legally broken. The air in the room reportedly turned heavy, because this was no longer palace drama. This was paperwork with teeth. Louise spoke with cold precision. She explained how the king's authorizations had endangered her parents' inheritance, her own future security, and the wider stability of the Edinburgh branch. Zara stood beside her with the letters of restitution, demanding an immediate reversal of the disputed financial movements made since September 2022. For Charles, the humiliation was brutal. A king raised to believe he was the final word on all things, Windsor was now being challenged by his own family, and worse, they had the documents to back it up. Louise and Zara had not simply questioned his authority, they had exposed the legal weakness underneath it. Their presence in the Oak Room effectively ended the era of Camilla's unchecked dominance. The Queen, who had allegedly spent 18 months pushing a slimmed-down structure where everyone became financially dependent on the centre, was suddenly staring at the one thing she could not charm, pressure, or rebrand away: proof. Even the Wales alliance, long assumed to be the natural protector of the family's future, was pushed to the side by this younger, sharper force. Louise and Zara did not need Prince William to bless their move. They had the only currency that matters when a palace argument reaches legal ground. They had the truth, and they knew how to use it. The confrontation shifted the entire morning. Charles, once strengthened by Camilla's whispers, now found the floor moving under him. The evidence made it impossible for him to dismiss the challenge as family bitterness or spoiled relatives complaining about money. This was a cold, legal reality, and every missing signature made the walls close in tighter. As word of the Oak Room showdown spread through the palace, staff members reportedly began shifting their loyalties. Many had waited for someone, anyone, to challenge the asset concentration mandate. Now, the quiet daughter of the so-called weak link had stepped forward as the face of a new order, one that demanded accountability even from the throne itself. The silence after Louise and Zara finished was not fear, it was recognition. Charles had been checkmated. He had spent so long trying to centralize control that he failed to notice the trap being built under his own roof. He thought silence meant obedience. Instead, it meant his family was gathering receipts. Lady Louise and Zara Tindall did not only protect the family's assets, they protected the honor of the House of Windsor from the very system claiming to guard it. The Windsor Black File was no longer just a dossier. It became a symbol of a new royal reality. The crown offers ceremony, but it does not erase consequence. And Camilla, the alleged architect of the asset concentration mandate, was now cornered. The two women who exposed her were already preparing the next phase of restitution, and to understand how deep this shift runs, one must look at the careful mechanical precision behind the crisis. What looked from the outside like a routine Royal Friday on March 13, 2026, was actually the final stage of a months-long underground legal war. Each date in the timeline marked another crack in King Charles's authority and another step forward for the restitution front led by Lady Louise Windsor and Zara Tindall. The timeline began on January 15, 2026, when a quiet asset audit was reportedly launched by private investigators working for the Edinburgh side. Through late January, Camilla pushed to speed up the asset concentration mandate, believing faster movement would secure control. Instead, every rushed decision gave investigators a clearer roadmap to dismantle the plan. Then came February 2nd, the day Louise allegedly uncovered the missing codicil's 7 signatures. That discovery was the legal grenade. It showed that Queen Elizabeth II had never intended these assets to sit under the sovereign's sole control. Secondary trustee consent was not decoration. It was the lock on the vault. The next major break came on February 18, 2026, during a secret meeting later whispered about by staff as the Shadow Alliance Summit. Away from the King's private secretaries and Camilla's circle, Louise and Zara reportedly presented their findings to Prince Edward and Sophie. They argued that waiting for Charles to see reason was useless. The only path left was a legal strike built on the late Queen's final instructions. That was the moment Edward changed the game. For the first time, he allegedly gave full approval to openly challenge his brother's financial directives. The man Camilla's circle had dismissed as soft became the quiet force behind the operation. In the final weeks before March 13th, the palace grew tense. Camilla sensed something was wrong, but could not locate the leak. She pushed for faster reports and pressured Charles to complete the restructuring of the Norfolk estates before the end of the quarter. She was playing for time. Louise and Zara were playing for justice. On March 5th, Charles reportedly authorized one last major transfer under pressure from Camilla. That transaction became the smoking gun Zara needed to complete the Windsor Black file. It showed, in blunt terms, that the King was still bypassing secondary trustee approval even after concerns had surfaced. By March 10th, the file was sealed and ready. Then, on the morning of March 13th, 3 black sedans arrived at the palace at 8:15 a.m., catching security off guard. The atmosphere shifted fast. From royal routine to corporate-style panic, the palace no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a boardroom facing a hostile takeover. But the true breaking point came at 10 a.m. in the Oak Room. That was the moment the myth of sovereign control collided with the reality of legal consequence. By presenting the documents face to face, Lady Louise and Zara made sure Charles could not hide behind advisors, secretaries, or Camilla's carefully polished explanations. He had to look directly at the people his decisions had marginalized. This was not a meeting between a king and his subjects. This was not a meeting between a king and his subjects. It was the moment the family members pushed aside, walked back in, and claimed their right to the Windsor legacy. By this afternoon, the truth inside the palace had become impossible to hide. King Charles's authority had been hollowed out. The timeline no longer looked like harmless confusion. It showed a clear fall from passive mismanagement into calculated obstruction and finally into total legal exposure. Every disputed transfer, every missing signature, and every ignored warning became another crack in the image of royal control. Each event was a missed chance for Charles to repair things with Prince Edward. He could have stopped the damage early. He could have honoured the late Queen's private wishes. Instead, he followed the path allegedly carved by Camilla, a path that led straight to the Oak Room, where he now sits isolated with the Windsor Black file as his only companion. The monarchy is no longer dealing with a simple financial dispute. It is facing the collapse of the private structure that held the family together for generations. The king is now a figurehead inside his own house, waiting for the next move from the team he never saw coming. The clockwork of this crisis has stopped, but the echo is only getting louder. What began as a legal move has now turned into a full royal Cold War. The Oak Room confrontation was not just an exchange of papers. It was the moment the old myth broke. The myth that the sovereign could act as an absolute and untouchable force behind palace walls. King Charles, once treated as the undisputed director of the family's financial future, is now sidelined. every decision he makes is watched by a newly empowered opposition inside his own bloodline. His relationship with Prince Edward, shaped for decades by quiet distance and brotherly imbalance, has now reached the point of no return. Palace insiders claim the two brothers have not spoken since the legal teams departed. On the afternoon of March 16th, Charles remained behind private doors, still shaken by the pressure of signing letters of restitution. For the first time in his reign, he is feeling the isolation of a leader whose commands no longer carry automatic legal weight. Queen Camilla, once seen as the driving force behind the asset concentration mandate, has watched her palace influence cool almost overnight. The disclosure of her alleged role in the financial purge has made her a dangerous name to stand beside. Courtiers who once chased her approval are now stepping back, realizing the tide has turned hard against her. Her reported attempts to rally support for a scorched earth response against Edward and Sophie have been met with cold silence. Nobody wants to be tied to a strategy that could now be pulled apart line by line. Camilla believed she was building a consolidated empire for her husband. Instead, she now stands in the wreckage of that ambition. The rise of Lady Louise Windsor and Zara Tindall has changed the internal hierarchy in a way no one expected. These two women proved that modern royal influence is no longer just about titles, seniority, or balcony placement. It comes from competence, patience, legal discipline, and the guts to act when everyone else is scared to move. Their strategy has created a precedent that will haunt Charles for the rest of his reign. The younger generation is no longer watching quietly from the sidelines. They are auditing, tracking, saving records, and ready to step in when the old system gets reckless. That realization has created deep paranoia among the king's remaining staff. Every unauthorized financial move now feels like a trap waiting to snap shut. Every request touching private assets risks being flagged and sent to the restitution front. The palace no longer feels like a smooth machine. It feels like a guarded battlefield where every signature could turn into evidence. This Cold War is now showing itself in every corner of royal life. Official engagements are being planned with painful care to avoid awkward proximity between the king's faction and the Edinburgh side. The old image of synchronized royal unity has been replaced by a staged civility that fools nobody. Every public event has become a possible theatre for silent defiance. One stiff greeting, one delayed entrance, one missing glance, and the public will read it as a coded message. Charles's effort to project normalcy is being undercut by the visible distance kept by the very relatives he once tried to control. The institution itself is trapped in gridlock. Charles still holds the title of sovereign, but he has lost the freedom to act alone on the family's most valuable private assets. Every major project he wants to fund, every investment he hopes to make, and every structural decision he tries to push now requires negotiation with the brother he underestimated. He has become a tenant in his own legacy, governed by the very laws he was born to represent. The Windsor Black File has not just redistributed wealth, it has redistributed power, stripping the crown of its old ability to dictate terms behind closed doors. The silence in the royal corridors is not peace, it is the sound of an era ending. As the sun sets over Buckingham Palace, the long shadows across the mall reflect a monarchy deeply changed. Charles may still wear the crown, and his profile may still appear on the nation's currency, but for the first time in his reign, he no longer holds full financial power over his own family. The palace is now bracing for a future that can only be described as a royal Cold War. The king holds the scepter, but Edward, Louise, Zara, and the restitution front now hold the keys to the private vault. That is the brutal new reality behind the palace gates. But as the legal teams retreat and the doors close for the night, one chilling detail remains at the bottom of the Windsor Black File. Beneath the Norfolk deeds and stock portfolios lies a sealed document marked the Cornwall Contingency. and that single label may drag Prince William into the centre of the storm. The document reportedly contains Queen Elizabeth II's specific instructions regarding the Duchy of Cornwall, instructions King Charles allegedly kept hidden even from his heir. If it reveals that Charles withheld information about William's future inheritance or the financial structure of the duchy, the fragile truce inside the palace could snap completely. If Prince William discovers that his own father has been manipulating the financial foundations of his future throne, the Wales alliance could turn from Charles's final support pillar into the force that breaks the palace open. This would no longer be Edward's restitution battle. It would become a dynastic explosion. The war for the soul and treasury of the House of Windsor is only beginning, and the stakes have never been higher. The monarchy must adapt to transparency, accountability, and legal restraint, or risk being swallowed by the same shadows it tried so hard to protect. Charles is standing on a balcony of his own making, but the ground beneath him has shifted forever. The ink on the restitution papers may be dry, but the stain on his authority is permanent. As the palace enters this uncertain night, one truth remains clear. The days of the absolute sovereign are over, and the era of the family, the law, and the paper trail has finally begun. And now the question is simple. What happens when the Cornwall contingency is opened and Prince William finally sees what may have been kept from him? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if you're following this royal Cold War, and subscribe for the next chapter, because the House of Windsor is not done shaking yet.